The old salvage yard was silent under a thick blanket of snow, broken down cars peeking out like mechanical ghosts. A lone cabin stood at its center, warm light spilling from its windows. Inside, Jack Winters sat at a cluttered desk, a bottle of whiskey at his elbow and a worn journal open before him. Jack, a grizzled man in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard and a weathered trucker cap, squinted at the pages through reading glasses perched precariously on his nose. His flannel shirt was stained with grease and what might have been blood. The walls around him were covered in occult symbols, newspaper clippings, and maps dotted with red pins. The sudden trill of a phone cut through the silence. Jack glanced at the phone on his desk before picking it up. "Yeah?" he growled into the receiver. "Jack? It's Sheriff Gunderson. We've got a situation here in town." Jack sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Emma, we've been over this. I'm retired. Call Abernathy from Millbrook if you need help." "Oh, you betcha I tried," Emma's cheerful Minnesotan accent crackled through the line. "But I can't seem to get her out of that damn bookstore. Come on, Jack. You know you're the best we've got." "Was the best," Jack corrected. Emphasis on was. "I'm too old for this crap." "Well, that's a real shame," Emma replied, her tone still upbeat despite the grim subject matter. "Because we've got ourselves a missing person, and I've got a feeling it ain't your garden variety kidnapping." Jack's hand instinctively went to the old wound on his leg, a souvenir from his last hunt. "What makes you say that?" "Oh, just a hunch, that and the pile of coal we found where old man Peterson's lazy boy chair used to be. Coal that's still warm, mind you, even though the room's colder than a witch's tit in a brass bra." Despite himself, Jack felt a familiar spark of curiosity. "When did this happen?" "Last night, December 13th. That means something, doesn't it?" Jack's blood ran cold. He glanced at the calendar on his desk, the date circled in red. "St. Lucy's Day," he muttered. "I knew it had to be something, so how about you drag that ornery behind of yours into town and give us a hand?" Jack closed his eyes, memories of past hunts flashing through his mind, the victories, the losses, the scars, both physical and emotional. He thought of the promise he'd made to himself after that last disastrous hunt. Never again, he'd sworn. But if his hunch was right, if this was what he feared it might be. "All right," he said finally, "I'll come take a look, but I'm not making any promises, you hear?" "Loud and clear, Jack. See you soon then." Jack grunted an affirmative and hung up. He stood slowly, his joints protesting the movement. From a nearby bookshelf, he pulled a dusty tome, its cover emblazoned with the title, Yuletide Terrors, A Hunter's Guide. As he flipped through the pages, a newspaper clipping fell out. The headline read, "Christmas Tragedy. Local family found dead." Jack stared at it for a long moment before stuffing it back into the book. "Well, crap," he muttered, reaching for his coat. The town of Pine Creek was a postcard-perfect vision of Christmas cheer. Twinkling lights adorned every storefront, and a massive Christmas tree dominated the town square. But as Jack drove his beat-up truck down Main Street, he could sense an undercurrent of tension. Shoppers hurried along the sidewalks, glancing nervously over their shoulders. Parents kept their children close. He pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, grimacing as he eased his stiff leg out of the truck. Emma Gunderson was waiting for him on the steps, her round face creased with worry beneath her fur-lined hat. "Well, if it isn't the town Grinch," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks for coming, Jack." Jack grunted, following her inside. "Let's see what we're dealing with." In Emma's office, crime scene photos were spread across her desk. Jack picked one up, studying the empty armchair surrounded by a circle of coal. "Old man Peterson," Emma explained. "Meanest cuss in town, always yelling at the neighborhood kids, threatening to shoot carolers. Real piece of work." Jack nodded, his suspicions growing. "Any other disappearances?" "Not yet, but folks are scared. There's talk of canceling the Christmas festival." "Might not be a bad idea," Jack muttered. Emma's eyes widened. "You don't really think... it's just a story, isn't it, to scare kids into behaving?" Jack fixed her with a hard stare. "Emma, how long have you known me?" "Going on 20 years now." "And in all that time, have you ever known me to believe in just stories?" Emma swallowed hard. "So it's real then?" "The Krampus." Jack nodded grimly. "As real as any monster I've ever hunted, and twice as nasty." Emma ran a hand through her hair, her face pale. "Krampus?" "Jesus, Jack. This is way out of our league. We need help." Jack nodded grimly. "You're right, we could really use a ritualist for this one. Someone who knows the old ways. Are you sure you can't get Abernathy?" Emma's brow furrowed. "Mrs. Abernathy, I keep on trying, but all I get is her voicemail. We're on our own for this one, I'm afraid." Jack sighed. "Well, we'll just have to make do." He turned to the window, watching as snow began to fall outside. "We've got 11 nights until Christmas Eve. If I'm right, things are going to get a whole lot worse before they get better." Emma squared her shoulders, her jaw set with determination. "Well then, we better get to work. What do you need?" Jack couldn't help but smile. Emma might look like everyone's favorite aunt, but she had a core of steel. "First, we need to warn people. Subtly. We don't want to cause a panic, but folks need to know to be on their best behavior." Emma nodded. "I can put out a notice about increased patrols due to holiday mischief. Encourage people to, be extra neighborly." "Good. Next, I need access to town records, births, deaths, any major events going back at least 100 years. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Looking for a pattern?" "Something like that," Jack replied evasively. "Krampus doesn't just show up for no reason. There's always a trigger, a summoning, even if it's unintentional." As Emma went to fetch the records, Jack turned back to the crime scene photos. Something was nagging at him, a detail just out of reach. He closed his eyes, thinking back to the lore he'd studied. Krampus, the dark companion of St. Nicholas, a horned, goat-like demon who punished the wicked. But why here? Why now? The ringing of Emma's phone jolted him from his thoughts. "Gunderson," Emma answered. Her face paled as she listened. "Oh, geez." "Okay, we'll be right there." She hung up, turning to Jack with wide eyes. "We've got another one. Lisa Carpenter down on Elm Street. Her husband just got home and found... Well, you better see for yourself." The Carpenter house was a modest two-story, its Christmas lights blinking merrily, oblivious to the tragedy within. Jack followed Emma inside, the smell of gingerbread and pine mixing sickeningly with something darker, more sulfurous. In the living room, the Christmas tree was toppled over, ornaments shattered across the floor. A man sat on the couch, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And there, in the center of the room, was a pile of coal in the rough shape of a human body. Jack knelt by the coal figure, ignoring the protest of his bad leg. He reached out, feeling the heat still radiating from the blackened lumps. "Mr. Carpenter," he said gently, "can you tell us what happened?" The man looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. I don't know. I was at work. Lisa was supposed to be baking cookies for the church sale. When I got home, I found... this." He gestured helplessly at the coal figure. Jack nodded sympathetically. "Was there anything unusual leading up to this? Any strange noises, cold spots, sulfur smells?" Mr. Carpenter shook his head, then paused. "Well, there was... but it's crazy." "Try me," Jack urged. "Last night, Lisa said she heard hooves on the roof. We laughed it off, thought it was just the wind. But she seemed scared. And this morning she was acting strange, nervous, like she was waiting for something." Jack exchanged a look with Emma. "Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. We'll do everything we can to find out what happened to your wife." Outside, Emma turned to Jack. "Hooves on the roof? You don't think—" Jack nodded grimly. "Krampus, he's marking his targets. We need to move fast." As they walked back to Emma's cruiser, Jack noticed something that made him pause. There, in the fresh snow, was a single patch of melted snow and a hoof print in the center of it. It was massive, easily twice the size of a normal goat's. "Emma," he called, "you got a camera in that cruiser of yours?" As Emma snapped pictures of the print, Jack's mind raced. 2 victims in 2 nights, both adults, both with a reputation for being less than kind. The pattern was clear, but something still didn't add up. Back at the station, Jack pored over the town records Emma had provided. Birth certificates, death records, old newspaper clippings. He searched for anything that might explain why Krampus had chosen Pine Creek. As the clock ticked past midnight, marking the start of the 3rd night, Jack's eyes fell on a small article from 50 years ago. The headline read, "Local Man Dies in Christmas Eve Tragedy." He was so engrossed in the article that he almost missed the sound. A soft thump, like something heavy landing on the roof. Then, unmistakably, the clip-clop of hooves. Jack's head snapped up. Through the window he caught a glimpse of a dark, massive shape moving across the rooftops. He grabbed his shotgun, loaded with special rock salt rounds, and hurried outside. The streets were deserted, the falling snow muffling all sound. Jack moved as quietly as he could, following the sound of hooves. As he rounded a corner, he saw it. Krampus stood at least 8 feet tall, its body a nightmarish blend of goat and demon. Curved horns sprouted from its head, and a long, forked tongue lolled from its fanged mouth. In one clawed hand, it clutched a bundle of birch twigs. In the other, a heavy chain rattled ominously. For a moment, hunter and monster locked eyes, then with a bone-chilling roar, Krampus charged. Jack raised his shotgun and fired. The rock salt round hit Krampus square in the chest, causing it to stumble. But the creature quickly regained its footing, barely slowed by the impact. "Well, crap," Jack muttered, fumbling to reload. Krampus's chain whipped out, wrapping around Jack's ankle. With inhuman strength, the monster yanked, sending Jack crashing to the ground. His shotgun skittered away across the icy pavement. As Krampus loomed over him, birch twigs raised to strike. Jack's hand closed around a small flask in his pocket. With a silent prayer, he unscrewed the cap and flung the contents at the creature. Holy water sizzled as it hit Krampus's flesh. The monster reared back, howling in pain and rage. It stared down Jack with a baleful glare, then turned and bounded away, quickly disappearing into the snowy night. Jack lay there for a moment, catching his breath. His leg throbbed where he'd fallen, and he could feel warm blood soaking through his jeans. But he was alive. As he struggled to his feet, he heard the sound of running footsteps. Emma rounded the corner, her service weapon drawn. "Jack, are you okay? What in the Sam Hill was that racket?" Jack retrieved his shotgun, wincing at the pain in his leg. "That, Sheriff, was our first real encounter with Krampus. And let me tell you, the stories don't do him justice." Emma's eyes widened as she took in Jack's battered appearance. "Oh, geez. We better get you patched up. Come on, I've got a first aid kit back at the station." As Emma helped him limp back to the sheriff's office, Jack's mind raced. He'd faced a lot of monsters in his time, but Krampus was in a league of its own, and if the lore was right, its attacks would only get worse as Christmas approached. "Emma," he said as they reached the station, "I need you to do something for me. It's gonna sound crazy, but I need you to trust me." Emma nodded, her face serious. "Of course, Jack. What do you need?" "I need you to get on that radio of yours and tell all your deputies to get everyone in town to bring their Christmas decorations inside. Anything with bells, especially. And for the love of all that's holy, tell them to stay away from fireplaces." Emma looked confused but didn't argue. As she went to make the announcement, Jack sank into a chair, his wounded legs stretched out before him. He pulled out the newspaper article he'd found earlier, rereading it with growing dread. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and Jack didn't like the picture they were forming. As the clock struck 3, marking the end of the third night of Krampus, Jack made a silent vow. He'd stop this thing, whatever it took. Because if he didn't, Pine Creek was in for a Christmas it would never forget, if it survived at all. December 16th, Night 4. Jack limped into the sheriff's office, his leg bandaged but still throbbing. Emma looked up from her desk, dark circles under her eyes betraying her lack of sleep. "Any more disappearances?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. Emma nodded grimly. "2 more last night, the Henderson twins. They were just kids, Jack." Jack's jaw clenched. "Krampus is escalating. We're running out of time." He spread a map of Pine Creek on Emma's desk, marking the locations of the disappearances with red pins. "There's a pattern here, and I think it begins here." He pointed to a point on the map with purpose. Emma leaned in, studying the map. "Wait a minute, isn't that—" Jack nodded. "The old church. Every disappearance has been within a 5-block radius." "But that church has been abandoned for years," Emma said, frowning. "Maybe not as abandoned as we thought," Jack muttered, "and we need to check it out."